Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. However, sometimes within the Clown Decade, things do get better. There are white pills strewed out everywhere. We don't all need to be doomers. It'll get better. And a thing that seems to have happened over the past week or so is that the Liberal establishment, they've mostly just dropped the whole pretense of immigration. We've won, effectively, the debate. Immigration, it appears, is no longer a sacred cow of the left. What do I mean by this? Well, this all massively started off with Keir Starmer saying record net migration shows Tories ran an open border experiment. The PM says previous government deliberately liberalised post-Brexit immigration as he announces deal with Iraq, which is a sentence that, while I say we have won the argument, Labour are not the party who are going to actually do anything about reducing immigration properly. It will come down naturally, I'll get into it in a bit. But they are not the party who are actually going to do what, well, Britain wants done with immigration, which is, frankly, probably something net zero or beyond. Certainly they want people deported at a higher rate, much higher rate, I would say, than they are now. So, net migration figures in the UK hit a record high of just under 1 million net immigrants, covering the period with Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, which Keir Starmer has said is an open borders experiment. The Prime Minister announced a deal with Iraq to tackle people smugglers and a white paper to overhaul the visa system before demanding an explanation from Kemi Badenoch for a party's decision to deliberately liberalise immigration. Starmer doesn't really care about this. He's effectively trying to play catch-up with reform, because if there's one thing that reform have been very good at since getting into Parliament, it is bringing immigration front and centre, and Rupert Lowe especially, constantly asking the government what is going on with immigration, how many people are getting benefits, how many people have come into the country, what is their plan to do it, all this sort of thing. I mean, honestly, just follow Rupert Lowe on Twitter. He publicises every time he sends a letter, every time he asks a question in Parliament, and it's just really good stuff to see. It seems to be his forte, while the others do their own thing as well. It's a multi-sided attack. Rupert Lowe is clearly the main parliamentarian of them all. The others seem to go off and do what they want. Obviously, Lee Anderson and Nigel Farage are the type who run their own shows on GB News. That's a massive help to reform. Richard Tice seems to be jumping from panel to panel, interview to interview. That seems to be his forte. And obviously they've got the fifth guy that no one really knows, but he does the odd thing he says on Twitter. But, I mean, you can't really expect much from him. He was literally thrown into the position of being an MP. He was a paper candidate. He didn't expect to win. So, as I say, they're all doing good stuff, and this is why, effectively, the whole establishment has had to play catch-up, and we'll get into that, don't worry. His accusation followed the release of official figures that showed the number of people entering the UK minus those leaving reached 906,000 in the year ending June 2023. Estimates from the Office for National Statistics were revised upwards from a previous estimate of 750,000. Yeah, I said this yesterday over on the Worcester Club, but you got to realise that that is a difference of something stupid like 166,000 people that they just didn't know were here, or people they didn't know had people they thought had left but didn't. This is how bad the ONS are. They were originally out by more people that came between the years of 1990 and 1995. That is how bad their statistics are. And obviously, Starmer's speech goes on to say it's not an accident, it's by design, it was intentional, which basically everyone agrees, yes, this was intentional by Boris Johnson. Everyone knows that now, thanks to Matt Goodwin and thanks to Dominic Cummings. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. His comments came after Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, signed an agreement with Baghdad to ensure close cooperation to tackle organised crime networks, a faster return of refused asylum seekers, and the formation of a new task force aimed to break up migration routes to the UK. It's better than nothing, I suppose. I don't think it's going to work in the long run. The best part of this deal seems to be the quick return of failed asylum seekers. I am totally fine with that. Anyway, to get into the nitty-gritty of this, the government would publish a white paper with a plan to reduce immigration, Starmer said, adding that he would target sectors seeking labour from abroad. We will reform the points-based system and make sure that applications for the relevant visa routes, whether this is skilled work route or the shortage occupation list, will now come with new expectations on training people here in the country. In other words, The only way you are allowed to bring people in from abroad is if you actually go along with the government's training regime. That's not necessarily actually going to reduce immigration. He was actually asked directly if he's going to put a hard cap on it, and he said no, he doesn't find it useful. Which, as far as I'm concerned, means that he has absolutely no intention to actually try and bring immigration down. What the point of this is actually to try and lower the unemployment statistics for younger people, because he's basically saying, right, you have to provide training for our young people or you don't get immigrant workers. And so that's basically forcing them to train, British kids, or, well, young adults really, to then actually get the foreign labour force that's cheaper that they want. And ultimately that's going to mean, a few months of young adults being trained, British young adults being trained, and then basically not being able to have a job because they probably cost more than the foreign labour that's still coming in. So, yeah, this is not a serious plan. However, it does seem to have opened the floodgates a little bit to people who are generally open borders types to kind of step away from that position. For example, Matthew Stadlin, who is a leftist journalist who has ended up on GB News as kind of the token left-wing view of a panel, came out and said this on Twitter: immigration has made and continues to make a huge and vital contribution to Britain. Without it, we would be in even more of a mess than we clearly are. And so much of the rhetoric around immigrants has been toxic and utterly reprehensible, driven in part by racists. However, and I say this as someone on the left and the grandson of refugees, the scale of immigration in recent years seems unsustainable. Now, effectively, that's like two sentences of complete cope and seethe, but then basically conceding, okay, Farage was right. It is completely unsustainable. And I know he's still got the rhetoric of, immigration has made huge and vital contributions to Britain, which, if you asked him what does he mean, the first thing he'd probably say is Windrush, which that is such a myth that I've covered so many times. It's not really worth going into detail here, but it's basically not true. It's an Americanization of British history, effectively. The whole immigrants have made a huge and vital contribution to Britain. It's largely not true. And the only examples we really have are post-Tony Blair, which, okay, the late 90s, early 2000s, probably even mid-2000s, basically everything after the 2008 crash has just been shocking. And that's when we really started to see the mass migration experiment. And that is exactly also when everyone sees things as going downhill. And, it's multifaceted, sure, not everything can be blamed on immigrants, but if we really are to say that without immigrants we'd be in a worse state, I do not see the evidence for that at all. In fact, I've seen all the evidence against it, which I've been through plenty of times, and so we'll just move on. And when it does come to the economic argument, even the people who massively argue for the economic reasons for mass immigration are now stepping away from it. Sam Bidwell of the Adam Smith Institute, who have been going on about wanting more immigration for ages, has said it's too late to stop Britain's mass migration experiment from becoming permanent. Unfortunately, that is true. That is a black-pilling revelation here. But my oven-ready plan and why Britain should change the rules around indefinite leave to remain, saving billions of pounds in the process. Now, I'm not going to go through this article, but you understand the idea. The Adam Smith Institute would have said, give them indefinite leave to remain. It'll let them get jobs. It will open a route for them to, start giving into the economy. But clearly, they've actually finally had to concede that indefinite leave to remain, which gives you access to the National Health Service, and even pensions, by the way, and universal credit, and loads of other benefits. They've actually found out what people like Farage and people on the right have been saying for ages, that it's basically a scam. As soon as an immigrant gets indefinite leave to remain, they don't go for jobs, they don't go to contribute, they've not become a British citizen, they don't feel like they have skin in the game, and instead they literally do just extract from the economy. The Adam Smith Institute has finally come round to sense in that way. I don't think people realise how much of an ideological win that is. This is anti-open borders, which the Adam Smith Institute pushed for ages, and almost straight away after Starmer says the open borders experiment doesn't work, all of a sudden it seems not okay to say that open borders are okay. I mean, even full-on leftist activists at the Led by Donkeys campaign, they're even implying open borders are bad. Okay, it's just for the super rich, but even then, they would not have phrased Nigel Farage is against open borders but for the super rich. They wouldn't have phrased it like that at any other time. This came out on the same day as that speech from Keir Starmer. And I wouldn't be shocked if they have links to Labour, because Led by Donkeys have never, ever had a go at Labour, despite the fact that we are currently being led by them, and they are the most unpopular government probably ever, and it's because they're Labour activists. And effectively what they're trying to do now is make it so that if you're an open borders advocate, you are a bad person. Like, the paradigm has shifted here quite substantially. I mean, even Politics Joe, this is how much the paradigm has shifted. It's no longer undocumented migrants. They've gone back to illegal immigrants. Like, this is literally a battle won in the culture war by the right. Politics Joe, again, having a go at Tories, which they should do, frankly, because the Tories did fail with illegal immigration. But this is like something you would see from a right-wing outlet, not something on Politics Joe, all about immigration. And it seems that giving amnesty to illegal migrants is probably not the way things are going to go. For a while I thought it was going to be, oh, well, they'll just say anyone coming over on boats, well, they're just legal, and therefore illegal immigration is completely gone. But I don't think it's going to go that way anymore. The civil service really don't care if they come across as failures. I think what's actually going to happen is they're going to keep going on with this smash the gangs rhetoric. Say, oh, look, a few less came over winter, look, it's working, it'll spike up again in the summer. And then they'll say, oh, well, I guess they're just using different tactics. We'll have to follow them around with the tactics, which is exactly the type of whack-a-mole that Matt Goodwin goes on about, that is exactly what that plan would turn into. Whereas a simpler thing is just to get the Navy out of the Channel and turn them back to France, which is exactly what we should do. Anyway, The Times, who are a centre-left paper, were probably the most blatant on this, saying Liberals have lost the argument on migration. To stave off the far right, tough decisions must be made, and made soon. If Liberals won't enforce borders, fascists will. Say what you like about American writer David Frum, whom history will remember as the man behind George W. Bush's Acts of Evil speech, but he certainly knows how to coin a pithy phrase. Frum wrote this line in an article for The Atlantic magazine in 2019, but it has stayed with me ever since. Stayed with me because I'm liberal. My family came to Britain as immigrants fleeing persecution. I live on about the most multicultural road in multicultural London. Migration is part of who I am, but I also think it is long past time we properly enforce our borders. The fascist stuff is overblown, but Frum's basically right, isn't he? Liberals failed on migration in America, where Trump is now returning to power to show them the price of their failure, and liberal-minded Tories failed in Britain too. New figures released last week reveal the scale of their blunder, and obviously we know the numbers by now. And he goes on to say, when my own family arrived in Britain at the end of the 19th century, they were part of a migration wave that brought about 200,000 Jews here, mostly fleeing Russian pogroms. The wave took place over half a century, between 1817 and 1914. Yet in the past year alone, about 250,000 Indian migrants came to Britain. And this is the point, isn't it? 200,000 Jews coming over 50 years, that averages to about 4,000 migrants a year. It's peanuts compared to what we have now, to the point where, yeah, it probably was easy to integrate them, and this guy is probably quite integrated, I would imagine, especially because he's been here for 4 generations or more. A similar number arrived the previous year. Yeah, so we're starting to get an average of about 250,000 Indian migrants coming to Britain, and that's not to mention all of the other ethnicities that are coming here as well, in much larger numbers than these Russian Jews came over. And the year before that, yeah, that's 3 years in which 250,000 Indians came over. That is a pattern that needs to stop. In the same 3-year period, 300,000 Nigerians arrived in Britain, nearly 300,000 Chinese people came too, and approaching 200,000 people from Pakistan. Again, not sustainable. Perfectly reasonable thing to say. I really do believe immigration can work. I believe in the liberal cliches, blah, 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 blah. But clearly immigration is not working in Britain today. One cannot reasonably expect our creaking health and welfare system to bear this current strain. Housing and supporting asylum seekers alone is now costing our impecunious state £5.4 billion per year. Yeah, it's nuts. Nor can one simply dismiss the bigots who argue that migration of this speed and scale represents a threat to the character and culture of our nation. And he goes on to say 70% of people think that immigration is too high. It's just good that the realisation is finally coming to the mainstream media here. Immigration has been crazy. It's been crazy at least for a decade, probably longer. And people generally understand that you can't bring it to absolute zero in, a 5-year parliament. People do understand that. That is how out of control it is. But people are growing towards, there's a reason Reform keep going up in the polls. There's a reason they keep being voted in council elections where they run. It's because as he says, nobody can trust the Tories to do it. They're in for 14 years and gave us the most immigration ever. Nobody can trust Labour to do it because Labour clearly are completely useless. So why wouldn't they take a chance on this new party that is happy to take in talent from the Tories that have been constantly going on about immigration, yet had no power to actually do anything about it necessarily? And if we go even further to the left with the New Statesman, openly socialist magazine, they were the magazine that got Roger Scruton sacked by, lying about him. They say, beware false promises on immigration. If immigration remains high under Labour, Keir Starmer's open borders experiment phrase will haunt him. Even the New Statesman, openly socialist, are saying, okay, you actually need to get immigration under control, otherwise we hand Farage a win. We've won the ideological debate. There's no other word for it. We've won. This is a great day. From today's perspective, it is clear that Farage was right. Perhaps if net migration had stayed at roughly the levels of the pre-referendum period of 300,000 a year, it is possible that the issue would not have returned to such prominence. Nonsense, by the way. So we've won in so far as nearly 1 million net migrants is too high, but obviously we've won kind of the first battle, but now we've got momentum. We can push them to say, no, 300,000 a year is ridiculous as well. To be fair, they instantly say, oh, but it didn't. Okay. So we don't need to push any further. For the last 2 years, the aggregate level of net migration has been 1.6 million. A public reaction was inevitable. The invasion of Ukraine and Hong Kong is, they've come over. They're not the issue, though. Few are objecting to welcoming refugees in these circumstances, but there are other areas where high levels of immigration have happened because of choices made by the government because of the cost of alternative or unappealing. We could have pursued policies that meant that universities were less reliant on overseas students, but that would have required higher tuition fees, and in any event, they are ancillary benefit to the UK in welcoming clever young people to the country. Well, that's the people that don't use it as a scam to get in the country and then go off the grid to become a Deliveroo driver. We could have also looked domestically for nurses and care workers, but that may not have worked and certainly would have come at a higher cost. Okay. Incidentally, again, we're spending 5.4 million on asylum seekers. We could have found the money from somewhere. Incidentally, one of the explanations that mental health services face such difficulty is that, for various reasons, it is very hard to recruit mental health nurses from overseas. I wonder why that is. Our current waiting list for mental health treatment suggests that it is just as well that we are being able to recruit nurses elsewhere in the system. The difficulty for governments is that the aggregate numbers for the last couple of years are unsustainable, but many of the constituent parts of that aggregate number are hard to reverse, or at the very least come with a cost. No, it might come with a cost, sure, but no, we can... Parliament is sovereign. Technically, it shouldn't be hard to reverse any of that. Well, maybe not reverse it, but certainly to stop it. But again, what's a good way to stop it or reverse it? Well, as the Adam Smith Institute says, the indefinite leave to remain, they have access to all of the welfare that benefits actual citizens. Well, firstly, turn those taps off, and those people will probably go away. Don't give access to people who aren't citizens. Even leave the Commonwealth if we have to do this, but don't allow people to have voting rights or any sort of full citizenship rights if they come from a Commonwealth country. That's another one that's easy to reverse. Obviously, ramp deportations up, increase the push factors. That will already massively reduce the number of people coming in, but put a cap on that too, and it just signals immigrants, we have enough. We kind of need to stop now. And people will get that signal and not come here. You put the Navy in the Channel, by the way, and turn boats back, they won't bother with that anymore. But we don't do that, so they just keep coming over. 20,000 since Labour came in, by the way. 20,000 illegal migrants. But that does not stop our parties from promising action. Badenoch has announced that a Conservative government will introduce an immigration cap. This is... oh no, they promised to bring it down to tens of thousands. They never actually promised a cap. But again... this is riffing off reforms, and it's not even as good as reforms, because it's not a cap at net zero, it's a cap at net 100,000. This is a revealing early move from the Tory leader, which suggests that her immediate priority is to see off the reform threat. Well, yeah, they got destroyed because of reform. There is no doubt that concern over immigration drove many of the 2019 Tory voters to abandon the party in July, not least because of the broken pledge to stop the boats. But if she goes too far down this track, she risks being viewed as reform light and alienating a large part of the electorate, including many who are concerned about high immigration but dislike the emphasis. Yeah, I don't think so. Again, nearly 70% of the UK think immigration has been too high. That clearly signals to me that they would be happy with a cap and to stop the boats. Keir Starmer has accused the Tories of pursuing open borders experiment. It is the sort of hard-hitting language that Farage might use. Now, just to dwell on this point for a second, for some reason, people don't think that Farage doesn't use this hard-hitting language. Here is a clip from 2 years ago.
We have a population crisis in this country. It's out of control, and it's directly because of open borders. And
as I say, for some reason this is something that the literal socialist left in Britain, and for some reason the online right, are shaking hands on, that Farage has cooked. That Farage never used terms like open borders. Sure, he didn't say in that Winston Marshall interview that he's for mass deportation, but if you listen to that interview, it is because he just can't be bothered with all the interviews he'd have from then on, all the headlines that effectively say, oh, Farage said this. He doesn't want to talk about the actual words that are being used to describe what he wants. He just wants to describe what he wants. And what he wants is what a lot of people want, which is just to deport thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, possibly even hundreds of thousands of people for being criminals in the UK and coming here illegally. That is fine. And then when it comes to, oh, Keir Starmer's outflanking him on the right, did you hear this speech? And I'm just thinking, this was Farage 2 years ago. This is Farage now. What are you talking about? They're copying his homework. And this sentence here, it is the sort of hard-hitting language that Farage might use. No, not might use, has used. It is annoying me how much people are downplaying what Farage has actually said. It needs to stop. That video on Connor Tomlinson I made 2 days ago, I was probably a bit too nice to him. No, it has to stop now. Anyway, I won't dwell on that anymore. So, presumably the intention is to so contaminate the Tory record that Labour will be inoculated from any subsequent attacks on its own record. It is a strategy that comes with risks, however. The language might not just mirror Farage, but also assist him. Yeah. It validates the argument that reducing immigration merely requires the will to do so, because it does, and does nothing to explain the trade-offs to the public. The public know what the trade-offs are. Oh, it helps the economy. The public just don't believe you. They don't believe you. Everyone has seen things get harder. Oh, we've had a cost of living crisis, but we've had 1 million migrants come in when the cost of living crisis hit. Didn't help the economy. Oh, it could have been worse off. I don't think it could have been much worse off. If immigration remains high under Labour, the open borders experiment phrase will haunt Starmer, and I hope it does. Immigration is an issue that cannot be ignored, given the levels are too high to maintain public support. In bringing them down, however, mainstream politicians should be wary about making promises they cannot deliver. Failing to meet raised expectations would once again be a gift to Farage. So again, what the New Statesman has effectively said is, okay, immigration does have to come down, but if you don't bring it down substantially, Farage is going to win. And that is pitch perfect analysis as far as I care. However, having said all this, some radical Labour activists and even Labour MPs in this case didn't quite get the memo. Here is a little clip from Clive Lewis MP, who to be fair has really planted his flag on the hard left of the party.
This Sunday, the 8th of December, all the details will be below this video. Some of us in Norwich will be gathering outside the Brook Hotel. Now that's where they keep migrants and asylum seekers who've come to this country. And we know that the far right may be turning up as well to protest, hopefully peacefully, outside the hotel. That's their right, but it's also our right as citizens of Norwich in this country to stand there and protest in support of people who come to this country looking for help.
Yeah, so the open borders experiment hasn't worked. It needs to substantially come down, according to Keir Starmer. We do need to stop the boats and stop people coming over for which Clive Lewis claims they come over looking for help and support. And as I say, Keir Starmer and an awful lot of the left have kind of had to cede, yeah, this isn't actually sustainable or a good thing anymore. So Clive Lewis clearly didn't get the memo, or got the memo and decided instead to ignore it, to remain high status in with the hard left weirdos. Anyway, Rupert Lowe of Reform decided to reply to this, saying, "Morning, Clive. I've asked the Home Office to establish a scheme through which MPs supportive of illegal migrants can house one in their own home. You say migrants are welcome. We wouldn't want anyone to think you're a hypocrite. I assume you'll be participating." And of all Reform MPs, Rupert Lowe is easily my favourite. Not least of all because he read geology like me at university. But as I say, he has been pushing and pushing and pushing in Parliament and to the government asking for data, saying what's the statistics for migrants in this capacity, how many benefits are they getting, are they on universal credit? It's all great, and this is exactly how to get them. This is what happened over in America to help Trump win, by the way. When migrants came over to Texas and what have you, governors would put them all on buses and drive them off to areas of America, to states in America, cities in America specifically, that have said that they are open to migrants and they welcome them. And guess what? They tried to get rid of them. So Rupert Lowe trying to do something official, saying let's get a scheme going to make sure that the people saying that we should have more migrants actually have to suffer the consequences of it. Not necessarily suffer, they might say that they're happy with it. And see where it goes. It's perfect. It is great politics. I hope they continue, as I hope all of Reform continue. I think they've all done really well. And in doing this, it's part of the reason they keep winning the debate. Everyone now keeps making promises about immigration beyond the simple promises of tens of thousands a year. Oh, there's going to be a hard cap this time. It's not just going to be a target. Yes, we will smash the gangs and stop the boats. I mean, it's not going to go anywhere, sure, but it clearly shows, as the New Statesman said, that there is a ideological win here for the right, and if it's not implemented properly, it's a free win for Reform. It's going to be amazing. Anyway, I think that's everything I had for you for today, so Laughing at the Guardian returns Saturday. Do look forward to that. Monday, we will be having the Antiquity stream yet again over on the Worcester Club. Tuesday, it'll be Tosh Talks. Don't know what the topic is yet. With that, do become a subscriber, do become a channel member, do send super chats and super thanks. It is all great ways to help the channel out. In the meantime, everything I had for you for today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.